Welcome to your Canadiens Connection on Rocket Sports Radio. We are proud to be the trusted source for all things Habs for more than a decade. This is the Canadiens Connection Podcast.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Canadiens Connection Podcast, right here on Rocket Sports Radio, where we keep you informed, engaged, and entertained. And we talk about one thing only, and that is the Montreal Canadiens. We're glad that you're here with us today. We've got a really, really fun show for you today. But first, some introductions. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Amy Johnson. I'm going to be your host for today's show for episode 340 of the Canadiens Connection podcast, titled Playoff Fever Hits Montreal. Can the Habs hold on? We're going to answer that question, hopefully. And to do that, I need the help of my co-host, my trusty co-host, who's here with me in the studio each and every week. He is our founder and president here at Rocket Sports, and his name is Rick Stevens. Welcome, sir. How are you doing today?
I've got only one thing to say, and that is it's officially spring.
Woohoo!
And the Montreal Canadiens are in a playoff spot.
Whoa.
It's been a while since we've been able to say that.
Yeah. That's exciting.
Back to, well, if you don't count the COVID years, it's way back, goes way back. So, yeah, there's excitement in Montreal.
A little bit.
As you said, playoff fever. And, yeah, the weather's getting a little better. It's,
A little bit.
Yeah.
It can't make up its mind yet, but that's pretty typical for March.
10 degrees and rain in Montreal. Cooler this week, but.
It was in the 70s.
Huh?
Here in Pennsylvania this week.
Okay. Yeah. Clarify where you are. Yeah.
It was in the 70s in none of it. No, not really. We've got a lot to talk about this week.
We do.
We're gonna get you. We're gonna talk about a little brief recap on what happened in the games the Canadiens played this past week. We've got some roster updates for you as far as personnel, injury reports, that type of thing. We're going to dive into the Habs prospect report. We've got some exciting updates for you there as well. And we're, of course, going to talk just a little bit about some of the things that took place at the NHL GM meetings in Florida earlier this week. And how do you feel about your Canadiens club owner? The Athletic has some NHL owner rankings, and so we're going to find out where Montreal falls on that list. As well as who in the NHL has the best and worst defensive pairings. Where does Montreal fall on that list? Could be interesting. Then in the second segment, we hit our big topic, which is playoff fever has hit Montreal. We're going to take a look at an update on the wild card race, of course. But we're also going to hear from Kent Hughes, because Kent Hughes did himself a mini whirlwind of a media tour this week.
He was everywhere.
In fact, it wasn't so mini. Yeah, he was all over the place media-wise this week. And so we've got a lot of audio to bring to you from kind of culminating from all of those interviews. And he had some interesting things to say that we want to talk about and kind of weave that into where the Canadiens find themselves in the playoff race at this moment. Then, of course, in our final segment, we're going to let you have your say, and we've got some great responses to last week's Canadiens Connection question of the week from a couple of our viewers and listeners that we're going to read for you. And remember, if whether you're a longtime listener or watcher, or if you are new to the show, we really like this to be an interactive podcast, and so we always want to hear from you, whether it's a question that you have about the Canadiens or their prospects, or a comment or some feedback. But the easiest way we make for you to interact with the show each and every week, you'll hear us in the second segment ask you a question of the week. And then we want you to think about it and give us your thoughts on that question. And if yours is one of the best ones that we get for the week, then we'll read it out loud for everyone to hear next week on the show. So the way to do that, just text us at 5853-ROCKET. That's 5853-ROCKET. Leave a comment on our YouTube channel if you'd like to do that, or you can always hit us up on social media at Habs Connection on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. So last week, 3 games for the Canadiens, mostly at home. There was one on the road, but starting off last Saturday night with a visit to the Bell Center for the Florida Panthers. And prior to that game, Paul Maurice had told reporters that the last time he wasn't happy with how his team had performed was the last time they had played Montreal. And I'm going to go ahead and say he probably didn't get any happier with them after Saturday night's game, losing to Montreal 3-1, which I don't know that anybody had on their bingo card.
No, in fact, he wasn't happy with his team. Montreal in that season series lead 2-0. They still have 2 games on the schedule with Florida to finish the season. This one was a great start. Patrick Laine with a power play goal 5 minutes into the game or so, his 16th goal of the season. Suzuki said after the game, Nick Suzuki, captain, said he liked the third period. They didn't force things, and they got a big goal from Christian Dvorak in the third period. Paul Maurice was very complimentary to the Montreal Canadiens, said they played their butts off, and the team was full credit for their effort.
Then we moved on to Wednesday, still at home in Montreal, and this began the couple of games back to back of that had real implications in the wild card playoff race. This was Ottawa coming to town on Wednesday night. And I think Ottawa probably left the Bell Center that night grateful that they've got such a firm grasp on the first wildcard spot, because Montreal took it to them, beating them 6-3.
Speaking of season series, the Montreal leads this season series 3-0. 6-3 final. It was closer than that, of course. Their Canadiens got a couple of empty net goals at the end of the game. They entered the third period of this down 2-1, but another strong third period. Brendan Gallagher had a 3-point night. Christian Dvorak, a 4-point night for him. Certainly one of his better games as a Montreal Canadian. Handing the Ottawa Senators, ending the Ottawa Senators' 6-game winning streak.
Then came Thursday night's game, which was had definitely more playoff implications and felt more like a playoff game, because this was Montreal visiting Long Island to take on the New York Islanders, who they're in a bitter battle for that final wild card spot with. And I don't know that Montreal would be very happy with how this game turned out. Yes, it was close. Yes, it went to overtime. New York did win in overtime, but there were definitely some gaping weaknesses in this game for Montreal.
Well, the one gaping weakness was in goal for the Montreal Canadiens. The Canadiens dominated this game. They dominated the Islanders. Shots were 41-25 for Montreal. Sorokin was terrific, as he usually is for the Islanders. Sam Montembeault, he gave up 3 bad goals. Let's just say he gave up a couple of bad goals against Ottawa, and he was not good at all.
The Islanders broadcaster was even, Sam Montembeault's going to want that one back. You kept hearing that.
Well, yeah, it was. And listen, Sam Montembeault, bad rebounds against Florida. It was a tough week for Sam Montembeault. The Canadiens bailed him out this week. The team did, and certainly that was the case for the Canadiens, and gained that 1 point before Bo Horvat scored in overtime to give the Islanders the win.
So that leaves the Canadiens with 74 points right now, 5th in the Atlantic, 18th overall in the NHL. We're going to talk more about what that means for the playoff positioning coming up in the second segment. So we won't spend time on that right now.
Yeah, 5 points for the Canadiens. So a positive week for sure. It's unfortunate that they gave the extra point to the Islanders when that's maybe their main competitor for that final playoff spot. That was unfortunate, but otherwise a pretty good week. Roster news. There was a signing this week, actually. The Canadiens signed Laval captain forward Lucas Condata to a 2-year, 2-way contract extension, which I fully applaud. Lucas Condata has been kind of just a stalwart for Laval, a dependable call-up when he's needed to be, but really good leadership for the youngsters in Laval, but I think also the more seasoned veterans in Laval have a lot of respect for him as well. For sure. He's a great captain, good in the room. He's not afraid to drop the gloves and stand up for teammates. He's a heart and soul player. As you said, signing that contract extension, 2-year, 2-way contract was a big deal for him, and this is what he had to say about it.
Very happy. I mean, Laval in Montreal is home to me and my family. That's where my daughter was born, so super pumped. It's a great organization, and super happy to be here for another 2 years. I didn't want to leave, and I love here. I love the people. I love the staff, and I couldn't picture myself anywhere else. So, yeah, I played here my whole career, and being the captain, being part of the team, and yeah, I didn't want to go anywhere else, and I love it here. And I have the hope to be here for even longer than the next 2 years.
Played his whole pro career with Laval, and couldn't picture himself anywhere else, and neither can fans. So congratulations to Lucas, and listen, he fans might forget that he had a 7-game stint for the Canadiens earlier in the season, and didn't look out of place at all.
No, not at all. So congratulations to Mr. Condata. More good news. Caden Gooley was at game day skate Saturday morning with his teammates, not still wearing a non-contact jersey, but good to see, little by little, baby steps. He's making progress.
Yeah, attended practice early in the week. Arbor Xhekaj, his good friend Arbor Xhekaj, was overjoyed and welcomed him back on the ice. And it was one of those kind of injuries that you didn't know if his season was over or when he could be back, but great sign to have him skating with his teammates.
And what we do know about the Canadiens' tilt against the Avalanche on Saturday night is that Sam Montembeault will be between the pipes once again, which I have opinions about. I don't know why. Well, I do know why, but the lack of playing opportunity for Jakub Dobeš these days, the fact that his starts have completely dried up, it's just not helping his development. And in my opinion, Sam Montembeault just hasn't been that spectacular to warrant the consistent starts game after game after game. But that's just my opinion.
Well, and it's not just Dobeš's development. Sure, that's one consideration, but Dobeš has been very good.
Well, yes,
and the Canadiens need Dobeš going down. They have a tough schedule. It's compressed, and they'll need Dobeš in the net. I think most of the commentators, a lot of the fans expected Dobeš to be starting against Colorado. He went into Colorado, into Denver, and beat them earlier in the year. Spectacular game.
It was like his second start or something.
And now, since the February break, the starts have been difficult to come by. It's been 10 days since his last start, and there's rumblings even amongst the cheerleaders in the Montreal media that Sam Montembeault is struggling. He's really struggling, and as I said, the Canadiens have certainly bailed him out the last 2 games. And you look at the way he's playing, and his save percentage on shots from a distance is way below league average, and that's because Sam Montembeault, he doesn't fight through screens. You remember Carey Price would look over, look around, look. Sam Montembeault doesn't think that it's his responsibility. If he can't see it, it's not my fault is his attitude. It's just not his responsibility. So, he plays low and with the screens and the puck usually beats him high. His glove hand is suspect. He doesn't play wraparounds well. There's been times where he has been, but this is going to have to be more of a tandem down the stretch if the Canadiens are going to hang on to that playoff spot.
Well, and unfortunately, the head coach is completely enamored with Sam Montembeault. He had some ridiculous statements this morning after game day skate when, I guess, asked about why Sam Montembeault was starting, and had some cliche types of things like, oh, well, he's the one who got us here. It's not the time to send messages, blah, blah, blah. And I just, that's going to get old for me, at least, very quickly.
Yeah, I saw that as a defensive response.
Yeah.
He said we wouldn't be here without Montembeault. That's a defensive response.
Right.
He's not really answering the question.
No. On a sad note, this week the Canadiens and Brendan Gallagher announced that his mom Della passed away after her very lengthy battle with brain cancer. He found out actually of his mom's passing when the Habs were in Calgary, and her funeral was this week, I believe. But the amazing thing, Rick, is he hasn't missed a game.
No, and I thought smart the way he handled it, the way the family handled it, the way the Canadiens handled it, letting him receive the news, letting him go through the funeral. The funeral was on Monday, I believe, and then
announcing
it publicly, and certainly the first question was, are you going to be in the lineup? Well, all of the tough stuff had already happened. And he said, hockey's my sanctuary. Hockey's my safe place. So that's what helped. And, they found out of her passing when they were in Calgary. After that, the Canadiens went to Vancouver, and the entire team went to the family home, a bit of a drive, Brendan said, just to show their support for him. And all that happened within the family and within the extended family that included included his teammates. So I thought that was very well handled.
I think so too. And what was also touching this week is we know that there are millions and millions and millions of Habs fans out there. But on social media, there are some who really stand out as super fans who try to, attend all the fan events. They get very involved. They like to collect a lot of merchandise and things like that. And what was really touching this week is that there's a very dedicated Habs fan on Twitter who revealed that during the last home game of the during the last time that the Canadiens wore Hockey Fights Cancer warm-up jerseys, she had purchased, those usually go up for sale for charity after they've been worn, and she had purchased Gallagher's the last time that they did this promotion. I think that was a couple of years ago. And so it's the lavender and white Canadiens Hockey Fights Cancer warm-up jersey that was worn by Gallagher during warm-ups. And on the tag, you know how everyone has the signs that they hold up in the stands that say, I fight for, and then you write in who you're fighting for. Well, they had one of those on each of the jerseys for each player to write in with Sharpie who they fight for. And he had written in Mom. And a really, really selfless gesture this week of this fan putting out on Twitter saying, Brendan Gallagher, I think that this now belongs back with you, and I'd like to get it to you. And then, well, the Canadiens, Rick and Brendan Gallagher saw that and have responded accordingly.
Yeah, on Twitter, LucyLou08 said, Dear BGalley17, I feel this jersey should belong to you. You wore it in warm-up in 2022, just before they stopped making them. So this is very unique, like your mom was. If you want it, it's definitely for you to keep as a memory jersey. BGalley17 replied, that's incredibly kind of you, thoughtful, and really appreciated. How about a jersey swap on the ice on April 16th? That's the Canadiens' last home game.
It's I mean, what came out in she's, of course, the Canadiens kind of have made a bit of a news story out of it, of course. And she did a radio interview where she admitted that it was the price tag for it to buy it at auction was about $1,500. Mm-hmm. It was not a cheap piece of memorabilia. And so for her to just be considerate enough to say, you know what, Gallagher, this is going to mean much more to you now. You should have it back. I think is an incredible gesture by the fan, and a lovely gesture by Brendan Gallagher to want to make a special moment out of it, and make sure that she has something in return. So something good out of
after a sad moment.
Yeah, after a sad time. All right, let's check in on the Habs prospects.
It's time for the Rocket Report. The Rocket Sports Media Team is your premier source for information about the Laval Rocket, the AHL affiliate of the Montreal Canadiens, as well as Habs prospects playing in the CHL, NCAA, and leagues around the world.
We mentioned some things about Michael Hage and Jacob Fowler last week. Just want to give you some updated information on both of them. Michael Hage was named the Big Ten Freshman of the Year, which is a pretty big deal for the University of Michigan player, with a whopping 34 points in his first season at Michigan. Pretty nicely done.
Yeah, we told you that he was nominated for the award last year. He won that award. We also told you that Kent Hughes was making the rounds this week, and he spoke about Michael Hage. And to Sportsnet, and his quote was, he's an incredibly talented hockey player who can make offensive plays, and he's a dynamic skater. The potential is for him to be a top 6 player in the National Hockey League. End quote. That would
nice.
that would solve some problems for Kent Hughes if that turned out to be true.
I think so. We mentioned some things about Jacob Fowler last week as well. He has been named a finalist for the Mike Richter Award, which is the award given to the goaltender of the year in the NCAA. And it's the second consecutive season that he's been a finalist for this award.
Mm-hmm. We talked about him being Hockey East goaltender. This is for the NCAA. As you said, last year he was also a finalist, didn't win the award last year. That went to Kyle McLennan. Who is he competing with this year? Red Wings prospect Trey Augustine, who's at Michigan State, Albin Boya in Maine, and Alex Tracy in Minnesota State. Fowler, will remind you, had a record of 24-6-2, 164 goals against, 940 save percentage, and a whopping 7 shutouts. You'll see more of his play as Boston College has qualified for the Frozen Four tournament.
Mm-hmm. Ivan Demidov controversy is back in the news. It's a healthy scratch on Thursday versus Avtomobilist. And apparently, getting the scratchola might start extending into the KHL playoffs. Coach Roman Rotenberg.
Yeah, that was kind of just tossed out there about he's not strong enough. He needs more time, building strength in the gym. Question mark about whether that will extend into the playoffs. Question mark of whether they'll send him to the MHL, the junior league, during the playoffs. You should know, and I think you do, that Demidov is SKA's leading scorer. So that would be interesting to say the least, but that's the kind of thing that happens. Now, he did play Saturday morning. SKA played against Torpedo. They won the game 3-2 in a shootout. It was Demidov played 14 minutes and 23 seconds. No points, 2-minute minor penalty, but was in the lineup. So we'll see how this all plays out. And don't get too excited about it. His contract in the KHL is over at the end of May, and then he'll make his way. Just start setting your sights on development camp.
Yeah, I think
he's going to be there and he's going to be fabulous.
I think everyone is going to be happier, Ivan included, when the fall rolls around and he is North America side.
And listen, all of this, SKA is trying to pressure him to sign a contract extension.
Yeah.
And he's
not
not
the way
going
to go
do it.
about it.
He's not going to do it.
No. And benching him is not going to help that cause. Laval continuing their progress forward to the Calder Cup playoffs. They beat Utica this week. They shut out Toronto this week, but they had a hiccup on Friday night, the first of a back-to-back series against the Cleveland Monsters on home ice, losing to Cleveland, who has struggled recently. Cleveland was on a 4-game skid, which they managed to snap by beating Laval in overtime on Friday night. It was a very feisty match. In fact, one of the refs seemed to be losing his temper. Maybe
manhandling.
Stepping over the line
players,
a little bit.
yeah.
I think
You don't see that. Usually the refs stay out of the fray and kind of take note of who's getting into the scrums, but no, hands on for that ref.
The two teams rematch Saturday afternoon at 3, so we'll see. We'll see if that continues from Friday night. Notable this week, 2 roster things for Laval. David Reinbacher returned to the lineup on Wednesday night, so he is back on the ice and playing. In fact, he scored a goal on Friday night. And Will Dineen played his first game for the Rocket on Friday night, which was a big occasion for him as well. So despite the overtime loss on Friday night, Laval still holds on to first in the North Division, first overall in the AHL positioning. They are still looking good for the playoffs, although it should be noted they have not actually clinched a playoff spot yet, believe it or not, because the North is too tight. The North Division is a lot tighter than, say, the Atlantic and the Central divisions are. So still looking to clinch a playoff spot, but I don't see that as being an issue with their 12 games remaining.
Just further on David Reinbacher, Chris G at Place Bell for us, for Rocket Sports, and grabbed this quote from David Reinbacher after that 3-2 loss to the Monsters. Reinbacher said, quote, "I'm feeling really good. I got a lot of trust today and I tried to pay it back. I'm really happy that I can finish every game. That's a big thing for me, to finish the game with no pain. Tried to give everything on every shift and be happy every day."
Okay,
we should all try to be happy every day.
Try to be happy every day. Trois-Rivières, the Canadiens' ECHL affiliate, still doing well. They did drop a contest to the Reading Royals this week, but then they turned around and beat Adirondack pretty handily. So they are sitting at 3rd overall in the ECHL right now and doing pretty well as well. Switching back to the NHL, the GMs held their annual meetings in Palm Beach, Florida this week. Looked like a devastatingly difficult
assignment, for the reporters.
For the reporters, it was standing on the shoreline of southern Florida. Looked like it was a really tough job. One of the more passionate topics of the week, of the meetings, was Devils general manager Tom Fitzgerald, who has some very personal interest in this subject, but it is something that I think that NHL GMs are going to sit up and really start listening to. We've seen more and more the cut-resistant equipment options coming into more of a mandated type of thing, or strongly encouraged. And so Tom Fitzgerald is very, very, very passionate about cut-resistant equipment options. He is, and he has said that it is very possible. He said, I know the NHLPA isn't going to like this, but I very well might mandate the New Jersey Devils to wear neck guards next year. And those are mandatory in the AHL this season, but Tom Fitzgerald might unilaterally just say the Devils are wearing them whether he likes it or not. The interesting thing here is he has very personal experience with this because his son, Casey Fitzgerald, plays in the AHL. He's a defenseman with Hartford, and had an injury, a cut injury this year, Rick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, back in December.
Sustained a cut to his neck. And so he's got a reason for being so vocal about it.
Yeah, a very serious injury. And Casey was wearing a neck guard at the time. It cut him above the neck guard, and a very scary situation for the player, for the team, for the
His
dad. And so with that personal experience, Tom Fitzgerald has become quite an advocate for improved safety equipment. We've talked about, there are some NHL players who have chosen to wear neck guards or other resistant gear.
Mm-hmm.
Many of them have gone to the cut resistant socks. There's wrist guards that you can wear, and the Canadiens through their trainer have tried to really encourage players, and some of them, Jake Evans said, I just can't get used to the feel of it. And finally, it was Josh Anderson, after this prodding from Patrick Langlois, that said, okay, fine. All right, I'll wear some cut-resistant gear. And for the very first time, he wore it against the Ottawa Senators this week. And
socks, right? Cut-resistant socks?
He had pants.
Okay.
And he must have had socks too, because it was Shane Pinto. The blade of his freak injury went behind his skate and went into the lower leg, and you saw when Josh Anderson went back to the bench, he looked down to check for injury, and he just said, "Wow!" You could see him mouth the words that he was shocked that he hadn't been injured, and that was his first game wearing that equipment. So
imagine if he hadn't.
Yeah, it's a slow process for players to adapt to a different feeling, but there certainly is a movement in that direction to protect them.
There is. The Athletic put out a survey that they did with fans. About 4,000 fans responded to this survey to rank NHL owners. And the Athletic staff, of course, had their own input on this as well, to do the rankings and so forth. And some of it might not be surprising. Some of it, maybe it is. But where does Jeff Molson fall?
Well, it's and this is the very first time that the Athletic has done this, much like their other surveys. 4,000 is a good respondent number, and they had fans fill out a survey in different categories about their willingness to spend to the cap, the stability in the organization, how the fan base is treated, if there's a vision for the franchise, all of those kinds of the confidence levels. So fans put in their ratings for their general manager. The Athletic staff put in their ratings. They came up with a combined score. So the results, Jeff Vinik, Tampa Bay Lightning, 4.9 out of 5, a combined score. That's an A+ on his report card. Vincent Viola, Florida Panthers, a 4.5 score, overall score, combined score. That's an A rating. And Bill Foley, who from the Vegas Golden Knights, 4.5 again, another A rating. All three of those owners have shown a willingness to do just about anything to win, and they're regularly competitive. And it's no surprise that those three in the top three. As far as Canadian franchises, Michael Andlauer, formerly a shareholder with the Montreal Canadiens and now owner of the Ottawa Senators, he gets a 4.1 overall score, and that's a B+ grade. He ended up 9th in the survey. Jeff Molson, kind of a middling rating, 12th ranking, 3.9 out of 5, B+. It's tough because I think that Jeff Molson wants to be all things to all people. He wants to, it'd be nice to win a Stanley Cup, but he likes to be involved in social issues. He likes to be involved in cultural issues. He likes to be involved all over the place. And we know, looking at the top three, you gotta prioritize. You have to have one priority as an owner, and that's winning a Stanley Cup. So, not surprising to see Jeff Molson kind of in the middle of the pack with his rating. One of the comments that was included in the report from fans, one fan said of Molson, he's nice. He's been seen around town talking with fans. Well, that's nice.
Isn't that nice?
That's very
That'll
nice.
help you win a Stanley Cup. That's not to disparage that person's comments. If you think he's nice, that's wonderful. I think the qualifications to successfully run an NHL club standards should be a little bit higher.
Got to be nice and driven.
Yeah. Sticking with the Athletic, they also have a ranking of which NHL top defensive pairs have been the best and the worst so far this season. Not surprised by the top couple. No, and this ranking is mostly based on analytics, with viewing as well. And it's the top defensive pairs, and for the most part, it's one defenseman, one top defenseman who gets the workload, and that others have rotated in with them. So for Vancouver, their top defenseman and one of the top, obviously, in the National Hockey League, Quinn Hughes. Number 2 ranked is the Tampa Bay Lightning and Victor Hedman. Number 3, Washington Capitals and John Carlson. Number 4, Colorado Avalanche and Cale Makar. Canadiens haven't been very good defensively this season, despite their success. They come in 29th out of 32 teams, and that's all on Mike Matheson. Yes, he plays a lot. He's one of the top 10 of all NHL players in average ice time. But a little suspect. His pair has been a -16 goal differential at 5-on-5,
Mike Matheson offensively, I think is given a little more credit than is actually there. He only has 13 points at 5-on-5 this season. And when Mike Matheson's on the ice, the Athletic points out that the Canadiens give up high danger chances and goals at an alarming rate during his shifts. So we've mentioned Kent Hughes several times, and he was asked about his defense. And one of the things he said is they have a lot of defensemen coming up. They have Reinbacher, Engstrom, Mayu that will be battling for a spot in the fall. And he candidly said, we have a decision to make on Mike Matheson. He's been an important part for us so far, but with 1 year left on his contract, there's a decision to make. And it's pretty clear Mike Matheson is not a number one defenseman in the National Hockey League.
So you need some good defense, and you need, as you said, a general manager who's driven in order to win a Stanley Cup. And is that going to happen for the Canadiens anytime soon? Well, at _Binner_memes on Instagram made a very, very, very conversation-starting graphic asking ChatGPT to predict the next 50 Stanley Cup champions. And Rick, if ChatGPT is to be believed, I'm gonna go ahead and guess that Marty St. Louis is not going to be the head coach by the time it happens.
Yeah, and Nick Suzuki's not going to be the center.
No,
the top center. There's a few people who have done this. This one, I like the graphic, and this person has a good following on Instagram. First for this season, 2025, they have the Colorado Avalanche winning, and the Avalanche come up again. ChatGPT does as Stanley Cup winners in 2032, 2044. 2074. They're on here a fair bit. ChatGPT likes the Colorado Avalanche. The Toronto Maple Leafs, if you hate the Toronto Maple Leafs, just mute for about 10 seconds. They're scheduled to win in 2027. The Oilers a year later.
Oh boy.
And the Bruins in 2031.
Oh.
All of that is, Seattle Kraken in 2035.
What?
Really? Seriously? An interesting little tidbit is the Buffalo Sabres don't appear anywhere on
in
this
the next 50 years.
in the next 50 years, which maybe is
sorry, Sabres fans.
Maybe is about right.
Maybe.
Okay, enough suspense. The Canadiens are predicted to win in 2040 and in 2071. So,
2040.
Yeah.
15 more years.
Yeah. And then 2071. So we got to hope that the singularity, that you believe in the singularity, machines and humans in order for all of us to get there.
If you need to take it with a grain of salt, though, that prediction.
Yeah.
ChatGPT also believes that in 2054, it's going to be the Quebec Nordique who win. So maybe they know something we don't. Maybe the Nordique are coming back in mid-century. Who knows?
Yeah.
It's pretty fun.
Lots of fun. A conversation starter. But you hear fans say, and I at least want a Stanley Cup in my lifetime. I've fortunately seen quite a few, but other fans have not yet. So you realize when you look over the next 50 years that it's pretty tough.
It is pretty tough. All right, we're going to take our first break here on the Canadiens Connection podcast. We've got a great incentive for you from our wonderful sponsors over at DraftKings, who have a new app called Pick Six. Which is very fun and very easy to play. So they've got a special for our listeners that you'll want to check out. When we get back from that, we are going to talk about how playoff fever has hit Montreal, take a deep dive into Kent Hughes' media tour from this week and the things that he had to say, as well as take a take a gander at the current wild card race standings and where the Canadiens sit in all of that. So you're not going to want to miss it. Stick around. This is the Canadiens Connection podcast on Rocket Sports Radio.
Hey, basketball fans, are you ready to win some real money? Check out Pick 6 from DraftKings. When it comes to basketball payouts, DraftKings Pick 6 dunks on its rivals, including Prize Picks. Just select 2 or more players and choose if they'll have more or less of a stat, like points, rebounds, three-pointers, and more. Pick 6 is available in most states, including California, Texas, Georgia, Missouri, and more. Don't settle for a smaller payout. Switch to Pick 6 and cash in your basketball knowledge. New players get $50 in Pick 6 credits instantly on just a $5 entry. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to play $5, get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Better payouts, bigger wins. Only with Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
And welcome back to the Canadiens Connection podcast on Rocket Sports Radio. Once again, my name is Amy Johnson. You can find me on X at FlyersRule. And our president and founder of Rocket Sports, my co-host here in the studio, Rick Stevens. You'll want to be sure you're following him on X as well, at Rocket Sports. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done so already. And whether you're watching us on YouTube or not, be sure that you have subscribed to our YouTube channel. You can find that at InsideTheCanadiens.com. All right, Rick said it at the top of the show. It is spring. The Canadiens are in a playoff spot for now. And the atmosphere really this whole week, particularly that game on Wednesday night, the Ottawa game, it's just been electric. I mean, fans are now that they've gotten that taste of what might happen, playoff fever is really just settled in. Outside of the COVID seasons, the Canadiens haven't been in a regular NHL playoff scenario since 2017. But this is all for now because the regular season's not over yet. The Canadiens have more than a dozen games left to finish the season, and the race is tight. Anything could happen, and nothing is really settled yet in the Eastern Conference as far as that wild card slot.
It's going to be a battle all the way, right to the finish. The Canadiens fans just have to enjoy the fact that Montreal is in the mix, in the conversation, and right now holding on to that last playoff spot. So the question has to be asked: How did they get here? How did we get to this point? And it was Kent Hughes, as we said, making the rounds in the media this week, and if we look at all his various media appearances, we can kind of gain some insight into what was going on, how decisions were made, and how they're looking forward.
So kind of the first place you start is the lead up to the Four Nations break, because you remember it was just 6 weeks ago or so, we were talking about how that big losing streak that the Canadiens went on, they dropped 8 of 9 games leading into that break. We were talking about, can they hold on to the break? Can they make it to the break? Is that going to be the big reset that they need? And has that big slide before Four Nations really changed things for Kent Hughes going into trade deadline season?
And we had told you that they had made their evaluation during the Four Nations break. And, it was looking like from all of the indicators that they were going to be sellers, and going into that break with the big losing streak after they had such a positive stretch around the New Year, Christmas time, was very disappointing. And Kent Hughes said, thinking back to that time, after at the Four Nations break, he said, quote, "We were disappointed, obviously, thinking we're not ready. Maybe we're best off continuing to collect draft capital and trading away expiring deals and living for the future," end quote. He also went on to say, I really didn't want to let unrestricted free agents walk away for nothing. So it was a difficult time. And then, as has been reported quite widely, he had a meeting with Nick Suzuki.
I mean, obviously, post-trade deadline, to have the team continue to stay down the path of winning more than losing makes you feel a little better about the decisions that we made, given that we, you come into Four Nations break and we'd lost, I think, 8 out of 9 games, and you're thinking about the future more than the present. And, I think it's been documented that Nick came in and said, what are we doing? And I said, listen, we're losing. I told you guys that there was no predetermined playbook for the year in terms of the trade deadline that your play would dictate, but it is dictating go win hockey games. And, to the team's credit, and Nick in particular, that's what they've done. So
he said, your play is going to dictate how I react, but we're losing. You guys are losing, and so I've got to act. Now, that was during the Four Nations break. The Canadiens had a few games prior to the deadline. Okay, I'll hold off making any moves. Now go win. Basically, is how that all went. And of course, they did just that.
They did. Now, the question has been, did they come close to getting, as he said, he didn't want to part ways with any pending unrestricted free agents. If the price wasn't going to be right, did they come close to maybe selling off some of those contracts? We know that Jake Evans was signed to a big fat extension just before the trade deadline, which for all intents and purposes basically took him off the trading market.
Yeah, so that was their prime piece. We know that there was teams there was half a dozen teams very, very interested in Jake Evans. That's where a first round pick could have come from. They decided to hang on to Jake Evans and giving him that contract extension. So next up was Yoel Armia. Again, in this media tour, Kent Hughes spoke to Pierre Lebrun and said, quote, "I wouldn't say that we came close to dealing Armia. By the time we got closer to the deadline, we started to move the goalposts a little bit for everyone. I told teams, I can't say an absolute no, but there's going to have to be a massive overpay for us to consider doing it." So stop there for a second. And it was reported that Kent Hughes said no to a second round pick for Yoel Armia. And then that deal, those deals were there. There were a couple of deals for a second round pick for Yoel Armia. And he probably would have gone ahead with that if the Canadiens were losing just prior to the deadline. They started winning. So then, as he said, we moved the goalposts. We said, how about a first round pick? And that would have, as in his terms, been a massive overpay. But they would have still gone ahead with that if a team was willing to do that. So he goes on from Yoel Armia and says, quote, "The other pending UFAs. David Savard and Christian Dvorak were less likely for me because I just didn't think the return was worthwhile, and we would have had to grab players out of Laval and weaken Laval just to get mid-round picks. It just wasn't worthwhile.
Okay.
So, didn't want to disturb the success in Laval, they would have got those players back for the playoffs, but didn't want to disturb their push towards the playoffs and keeping that first spot, keeping a good ranking to end the season. And would have gotten mid-round picks for David Savard or Christian Dvorak. We'll remind you that a year ago that Hughes turned down a second-round pick for David Savard. That was a deal that had been reported, but was getting offers of lesser than that for Savard and Dvorak this season.
And he wasn't having anything about potential offers of second-round picks in exchange for Yoel Armia.
Right.
Ken Hughes did go on to say, quote, it made us say, okay, we're going to wait and just see. You feel pretty good when you don't end up doing it, meaning you don't end up selling, and that the team continues to win. Whether the team makes the playoffs or not, if the bottom had fallen out right away on us, meaning after the deadline, if then they started just tanking again, he went on to say, you'd feel terrible. So he's kind of covering all of his bases there, but he's obviously grateful that the rejuvenation that the team showed in that short sample between the end of Four Nations and the trade deadline didn't suddenly dry up after he did nothing at the trade deadline.
Well, and that's not a confident GM.
No.
He's not confident in his team. He's seen how hot and cold this team has run all season long, and the team made him look good by continuing to win after he stood pat. But it's clear that if he had stood pat and they had fallen out of the race rather quickly after the trade line, he would have felt awful that he had made a mistake. So fortunately, team made him look good. All is well with the moves that he made.
Absolutely. So Rick, what about them being a buyer? He had some comments in an interview to Sportsnet about how things lined up for him in terms of whether or not he would have been a buyer at the deadline.
He said, quote, if there had been somebody for us to get that could play up the lineup and help, somebody who could have played with Newhook and Patrik Laine, that's where we were testing the waters. But to bring in somebody down the lineup when Marty really liked the composition of his lines and wasn't going to change them, we'd have just been bringing in injury depth, and the cost for injury depth was really significant. This is fascinating in all sorts of ways. One, clear that they want to bring in somebody. They tried to bring in somebody that would have helped that second line. That was with Kirby Dach out, and that was injury replacement, and that was because they wanted to shore up that position. That's something that they're going to want to do long-term anyway. But the fact that the head coach weighed so significantly, in fact, cast the trump card on this in saying, you can bring somebody in if you want, but I'm not going to play them. I like my combinations. It's fascinating, the power that Marty St. Louis wields with respect to decisions for now and for the future.
Well, and quite frankly, it seems that management is enabling him to do that, to wield that kind of power by maybe he's not telling them, but if Kent Hughes can say in the media that, well, Marty really liked the composition of his lines and wasn't going to change them, well, then they have an understanding one way or another that, Marty's not going to move players around just because they bring somebody new in, and that's, as you say, that's a kind of a fascinating revelation there. Whether that is helpful to the team in the future or not remains to be seen. I don't think it would be. Maybe it is for this season. Next season, I don't think they can allow him to not play ball quite so much.
Remember that little bit of a power struggle that happened early in Marty's kind of tenure when Hughes brought up Sean Farrell, and it's interesting and relevant because there's a lot of talk now. Sean Farrell is tearing it up in Laval right now after a slow start to the season. Joshua Waugh got his first goal of the season the other night, but has basically been invisible. And there's lots of talk about bring up Sean Farrell. And remember the last time that Hughes brought up Farrell just to get a look at him. And Marty's attitude was, you can bring him up, but I don't have to play him. And he was publicly miffed that Sean Farrell was that the general manager asked that Sean Farrell would be in the lineup to take a look at him. Fascinating.
Yes, it is. So through all this, in his interviews, Kent Hughes did say that he's learning things about his team.
That when we're playing our game, we can play with anybody. That we're still, searching for that consistency. I think if you look at any stretch of games, we've been very good. We haven't been great in other stretches, and we're back on another winning stretch. I think which is, to me, to a certain degree, to be expected with a young team. One of the last things to come is consistency with a player and a group. So we're hoping that all of this, they're building blocks, they're foundational pieces that we acquire and carry forward with us.
So he acknowledges that consistency is an issue. I use the phrase hot and cold. They've gone on, 10-game streaks where they've been very good. They've gone on 10-game streaks where they've been very bad. They're on a pretty good one right now. They've been one of the best teams since the Four Nations break. But he said in building a team, especially when it's young players, individually and team-wise, consistency is the last thing to come. But whether they win or lose, he feels this is important learning lessons and will be a building block to the team taking next steps to the rebuild.
Definitely. Before we move on to the wild card update, I think that you had just a couple of other tidbits from his interviews that you wanted to mention.
Thanks for mentioning that. That just fascinating things that don't really relate to other points that we've been covering. He said, how would he describe the difference between himself and Jeff Gorton and how they work together. And this was in the Saravelli interview. He called Jeff Gorton reflective and he called himself reactive, which I found very interesting. Also said just while they're watching games that Gorton can get really, really angry or really excited during games where he's a little more even keel. Another little tidbit that, Kent Hughes said, he enjoys the job. He enjoys working with players. Who loves the hockey stuff. Everything towards the rebuild and building team. He doesn't like any of the administrative things. So at one point, rather early on, he went to Jeff Gorton and said, you know what? There's so much of this administrative stuff, the operations stuff. How about we create a new position and hire a COO, a chief operations officer, to deal with this stuff. And Jeff Gorton just looked at him and said, have you looked at our salaries? I think we make enough to look after those duties, which I thought was pretty funny. And Saravelli also asked him whether Cole Hudson, Lane Hudson's brother, was ever a consideration. We know he was a Capitals draft pick. And rather candidly, Hughes said no. Can't have another guy with the lack of size. And the other problem was another left shot defenseman. So he said that as far as on the left side, that he likes Engstrom, who is a puck mover in Laval also. He didn't mention it, but obviously on the right side, it's Mailloux, who's a very good offensive player. So they didn't give any consideration to selecting Cole Hudson.
Phew. That was quite a lot that Kent Hughes did this week. Always good to hear from the GM in settings outside of the Bell Center or Broussard press room, because sometimes when he's a bit more relaxed and one-on-one, he has a little more freedom with some of his insights. And so some really interesting things covered there. So where does that leave the Canadiens right now in the wild card update? Well, as we mentioned, through their 68 games played, they've got 74 points, 5th in the Atlantic, 18th in the NHL. Ottawa is pretty locked in right now to that first wild card spot. The Canadiens are currently occupying the second wild card spot with their 74 points, but the Islanders, everybody else behind, there's 4 teams behind them that are really kind of within the distance, right?
4 teams within 4 points. The Islanders and Rangers just 2 points back. The Rangers, the Canadiens have 2 games in hand on the Rangers. The Islanders and the Canadiens have played the same number of games. Much of this we talked about last week, just to give you an update. Regulation wins is going to be a tiebreaker. The Canadiens, that's not favorable for them. Goal differential, not favorable. Strength of schedule is favorable. Weak schedules ahead for both Montreal and Ottawa. Not good news for the Islanders or Detroit. As far as the playoff odds, and there's many models you can follow. We've been using Money Puck all season long, so just for consistency's sake, we'll stick with them. As you said, Ottawa is kind of locked in. They're 91% chance of making the playoffs, on pace for a 94-point season. The Canadiens are in the next group, and Boston's been taken off this list from last season. They're out of it. Columbus and Detroit still, well, maybe long shots. What we're looking at is Montreal, the Islanders, and the Rangers. And Montreal is the top of that group in terms of probability. 44.6% chance of making the playoffs for the Canadiens, 34.6% for the Islanders, and 20.4% for the Rangers. So the Canadiens are looking good at this point. But if we get a cold stretch, that everything can change very, very quickly.
And we'll see what happens in a few minutes. We're gonna talk about their upcoming schedule for the next week, and this is not going to be an easy week for them to get through. We'll talk about that in a minute. They've got 5 games left in March. Colorado plays at the Bell Center tonight, Saturday night. Then they go on a road trip for 4 games in 6 days. That's a tall task. And as you had alluded to in the first segment, I would hope that they would acknowledge that they're going to have to tap Jakub Dobeš at some point during this road trip.
Yeah, they have to, but both because of workload, because he is a little more steady at this point. Sam Montembeault's struggling.
Absolutely. And the end of that road trip is a Sunday afternoon game in Florida against the Panthers. It's not going to be an easy week. It's really not going to be an easy week. So how confident are all of you feeling in Montreal's playoff chances? If you had to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, this is our Canadiens Connection question of the week. On a scale 1 to 10, How confident are you in Montreal's playoff chances? Now, to clarify, this is chance of making the playoffs, not if they get into the playoffs, how well you think they're going to do. This is how confident are you that they're going to make the playoffs at this stage on a scale from 1 to 10. Send us a text on the Rocket Sports text line. That's 5853-ROCKET. Send us an answer on YouTube, InsideTheCanadiens.com, or hit us up on social media. That's at Habs Connection on X, Facebook, or Instagram. We want to know what you think. You can also, Substack is always also a popular place to leave a comment as well. However you do it, just get your comments in. Let us know on a scale from 1 to 10, how confident are you in Montreal's chances of making the playoffs? We want to know. With that, we're going to take one last break here on the show. When we come back, we had some great answers to last week's Canadiens Connection question of the week. We're going to read those to you as you kind of get settled in and ready for what's going to be, I think, a nail-biting week of hockey for the Montreal Canadiens as they inch closer and closer to maybe making those playoffs. So take a listen to a message from our friends over at DraftKings, and we'll be right back after this. You're listening to the Canadiens Connection podcast on Rocket Sports Radio.
Hey, basketball fans, are you ready to win some real money? Check out Pick 6 from DraftKings. When it comes to basketball payouts, DraftKings Pick 6 dunks on its rivals, including Prize Picks. Just select 2 or more players and choose if they'll have more or less of a stat, like points, rebounds, three-pointers, and more. Pick 6 is available in most states, including California, Texas, Georgia, Missouri, and more. Don't settle for a smaller payout. Switch to Pick 6 and cash in your basketball knowledge. New players get $50 in Pick 6 credits instantly on just a $5 entry. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to play $5, get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Better payouts, bigger wins. Only with Pick 6 from DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 14 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos.
And welcome back to episode 340 of the Canadiens Connection podcast here on Rocket Sports Radio. Don't forget, if you haven't done so already, just hit that subscribe button. We never want you to miss an episode of the podcast when it comes out every Saturday on your favorite podcast app. If you are one of our followers who watches the podcast on YouTube instead, it comes out every Monday. We don't ever want you to miss an episode there either. So be sure you hit subscribe, tap the notification bell. That way you'll always know when an episode drops. And of course, if you can leave us a review, if you're listening on a podcast platform that allows you to leave a review, we greatly appreciate when you do that. It just really helps boost our visibility on the various podcast platforms, as well as when you share an episode. So it's so easy for you to just tap the share button and share the episode on your favorite social media platform. It really goes a long way to helping us, and we very much appreciate it. So don't forget, this week's Canadiens Connection question of the week. We want to know, how confident are you on a scale of 1 to 10? How confident are you about Montreal's chances at making the playoffs? Show your work. Tell us why you feel that way, whatever number it is that you choose to pick. I feel like I'm like a 5 right now because I really just don't know how they're going to go, but I have to think about it. I have to think about it a little bit, but let us know what you think. Last week on episode 339, we asked, what's your confidence level in Montreal's ability to close the gap in the wild card race? And she 26, she came in and said, I'm gonna, this is a YouTube comment. I'm going to jump around her response for a minute because I first want to get to her answer to how fast she thinks they're going to be able to close the gap. She says, "Darn it, I've done a lot of studying and homework this week, so I'm late in commenting, which means I can't really comment now with what I already know." Because, well, some time had passed, some games had happened, so she knew that they had closed the gap a little bit. She says, "Holy, it really does suck to be late." And she said, "Maybe I can pretend I'm just really full of hockey knowledge," which is pretty fun. She also went on to say that she's got to love the word curious when referring to the Owen Beck, Joshua Waugh swap in the roster. And also the fact that Lina was out with an extended quote unquote flu. She said, if I'm not mistaken, both of those kinds of things have happened twice now this season. And she's saying that the fact that we use the word that it's curious, she says, in my eyes, that makes both of you guys really polite. And so I think I'll take a cue from you and stay polite too. She loves hearing about the prospects, Jacob Fowler and so forth. She says they are our future and they are exciting. Laval's been rocking it this season. Yay for baby Jack Eye. Huge congratulations to him. And then she goes on to basically say, thank you, as always, for putting together these amazing podcasts. She thanks us for reading her comment from last week and acknowledging her dad, who serves in the military. She says, he's my hero, and we're very pleased to be able to acknowledge your dad and every service member or veteran. She says, thank you, as always, for putting together these amazing podcasts. I promise that I won't drop any F-bombs. I'll leave that to coaches and players.
Yeah. So, being polite again and using the word curious again, just gonna, before I read, we're reading 2 comments this week from our regulars. Is what we have time for this week. But I just want to comment on something curious, and we're recording this just before the start of the Laval Rocket game, the Rocket versus the Cleveland Monsters. We told you about in the second game, back-to-back afternoon game. And in warm-ups, and we talked about David Reinbacher and how good he was feeling after last night's game, and he was so happy to be happy and in such a good mood. Well, Reinbacher was on the second pairing in warm-ups with Adam Engstrom, the aforementioned Adam Engstrom. But he's not going to play today. After warm-ups, it was determined that they would keep him out. Precautionary is the word. So that is curious again.
This whole thing with Reinbacher has been curious.
Very curious. And yes, they want to err on the side of caution and be
I'm all
careful
for that.
About his knee and any inflammation and all of that. But I know that a lot of fans are watching and saying, when is he going to be called up? I don't think that the Canadian, he's going to see the Canadiens line up this season. And what we want to be thinking about is if he's going to be able to manage the rigors of a full playoff schedule with Laval, because things are still not 100% right there. So we'll keep an eye on that for you this week.
All right.
And now, as promised, one of our regulars, we enjoy hearing from him every week, and that's at Center Heist 7948. Center Heist says, great show. I love it. You're both great, Amy and Rick. Now to answer the magic question, no, I don't think we'll have a playoff berth. There's just too many hurdles, too many teams like Ottawa and the Rangers to battle for those last 2 spots. And those are the 2 teams I believe will grab those spots. It's all going to be playoff hockey till the end, but I will commend the Habs for making it interesting. Honestly, I think we played way over our heads to this point, and that's a compliment. I think we're still 2 years away from a playoff berth, but headed in the right direction. And, he's got a good point. There's all kinds of metrics out there that are not looking good for the Canadiens. The top line continues, for the most part, to carry the load. If they ever get shut down, if the shooting percentage goes down, goaltending we talked about is an issue. Could be some questions there. And Center Ice has identified some of those questions. He goes on. Rick, I love you, brother, so don't take this wrong. Okay. I get the list of second rounders you mentioned. I mentioned that it, because some people were saying, why pick up a second round pick for Savard a year ago, for Armia this year? Second round pick, not much. And so for, devil's advocate, I was just saying, okay, here's a list of second rounders, pretty impressive group. So he says, I get the list of second rounders you mentioned, but those were a better draft class than those particular years. This year is not considered to be a good draft year. The top 15 trajectory is not comparable to those drafts. So that's why I didn't want a second round and later picks in return for those players at the deadline. And we also have to have space for all of those contracts. With all the space we have coming, we have to be very careful to have the contract space for the best talent we have coming. We'll already have to trade off some of the players in packages once we figure out who the Habs will be keeping. So very good point, but not this year. So, and he says, I love you, brother. Well, I have the most passionate discussions, debates with my brother, my own brother.
About hockey.
About sports, about life, actually. But yes, mostly about sports. And so, yes, if we can continue along that line, let me just toss out some other food for thought, and I'll work backwards here. About the contract space, well, Kent Hughes has been very adept in using those. You don't have to draft every draft pick you collect. Has been very careful to use those draft assets to combine them. He used that in the Newhook trade. He used that in the Doc trade. And if he wants to move up the draft at all, he's going to need draft assets. So they don't all have to be to take up contract space. And Center Ice, to his credit, says that. As far as this not being a good draft year, and I've heard that comment, and that's mostly because there's really no consensus number one pick this year. But I think back, if you think back in the 2000s, and it's widely recognized, the two weakest drafts of the 2000s, if you ask anybody, they'll say 2007, 2012. Weakest drafts. But there's talent in every draft. Mm-hmm. When you talk to scouts, there's talent in every draft, and it's up to the teams to identify that talent. If you look at what's considered one of the worst drafts, 2012, there was a lot of goaltending talent. Vasilevsky, Hellebuck, Frederik Andersen, Linus Ullmark, Jonas Korpisalo. I'm not saying the Canadiens need goaltenders. That's not the point. It's that there was talent in that draft, despite being called weak. Some of the best goaltenders of our time right now came out of that draft. 2007 draft, also considered weak. Well, the Canadiens picked up someone named P.K. Subban in the second round. So, I think be careful just wiping out an entire draft class because it's called weaker than one of the others. The other is if Hughes didn't like what was available this draft, then in the trade, ask for a 2026 second round draft pick or a 2027 second round draft pick. There's nothing that says that he would have had to have taken a draft pick from this year. So that's my little pushback as we continue our brotherly back and forth. Can't wait till next week.
Wow.
Yeah. And he has comments for you too.
Oh, does he now?
Center Ice. And Amy, I love you too. But normally I'd say let Savard go. But I think in the 7th slot, he's still effective for his leadership. However, I'd love it if he'd retire and we keep him as a consultant on the development team, much like Paul Byron, to help in practice scenarios instead. I'd prefer that to him playing. But I think he's got value in some capacity for the young defense we have. But I most definitely respect both your opinions. Your dear friend and fan, Center Heist, much love. Go Habs, go.
Well, that's a pretty well-rounded response, I have to say. And we appreciate the passionate and lengthy comments that we get from some of our loyal listeners and viewers. But we also want to hear if you've just got something quick to say, even if it's just one sentence. If you're a newer listener or maybe you're on the fence, you haven't commented before, just put yourself out there. We're only gonna put out what your handle is or your first name if you send us an email or something like that. So it's
and tell us where you're from. We like to hear.
Yes, and tell us where you're from. So be sure to get your answers in for this week's question. On the scale 1 to 10, how confident are you that the Canadiens are making the playoffs? They are going to have to get through this next week to really make a push.
This is a pivotal week, very pivotal week for the Canadiens.
Starting with hosting Colorado at the Bell Center on Saturday night. Then they turn around and head out to the St. Louis Blues on Tuesday night for an 8:00 p.m. Eastern time start.
That's got to be Dobish.
Yeah, I would think so.
St. Louis is his off-season home. It was where his brother is. That's got to be a Dobish start.
If there's a game, as sad as this makes me to say, that they should capitalize on, it's when they visit Philadelphia on Thursday night. Philadelphia has been struggling this season, last season, season before that. I digress. But that is the first of this is another place where we should see Dobish because they play Thursday night in Philly and Friday night in Carolina. And so that's a quick turnaround. Hopping from Philly to Carolina 2 nights in a row. We should see Dobish in that rotation somewhere. And then they only get, yes, we're going to talk to you on the podcast next weekend. But all of that leads into a Sunday matinee in Florida against the Panthers. So there are places that should be a given check mark on that list, but there's a lot more that are question marks. And they'll have to really fight through it. So we'll see how they do. We'll be back here again next Saturday, March 29th, for another episode of the Canadiens Connection podcast. We'll get you filled in on what's happened and where the Canadiens stand in the playoff race. It's sure to be exciting, and we can't wait to be here to talk with you about it. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Canadiens Connection podcast on Rocket Sports Radio.
Click subscribe so you never miss an episode of Canadiens Connection. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Rocket Sports.